Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Code Study, Counter Racist Code Study, the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and/or action for victims of racism, white supremacy. And we're going to be covering area 2, which are the pages, I think 101 to to 118. Oh yeah, awesome. So my beginning question for everyone is before reading this, what did you think education was? And after reading it, what do you think it is now? So that's the beginning question. Anyone want to take a crack at it?
I thought education was basically something that you go and you learn and somebody teaches it to you. And that's basically what I used to think of it. But from life experiences and what I've read, basically any kind of correct information you can get from anybody, any research studying that you can get. Um, you can basically kind of educate yourself and have the environment or whatever you experience in places to educate you as well.
For me, the thing I took away originally, I kind of grouped education with having it done at an institution like a college or a school. Afterwards, I felt kind of not dumb, but it's so obvious now that what education is basically just the process of learning, and that can be done anywhere. So yeah, that's me.
Um, when I was younger, I thought that education, I believed most of the stuff that I was told, and I thought that if it was in like history books or science books or whatever kind of books, that had to be fact. As I got older, and I mean a lot older, like into my 20s older, I started to feel like a lot of the stuff I was taught just doesn't make sense based on the life experience that I've had, and judging by like people that I've met, I've seen like common things in all of them. Like for instance, a lot of people that are labeled born with chemical brain imbalances actually had some kind of trauma that happened 15 years after they were born, and they're teaching, even to some degree, if you go to a therapist, they're teaching them partially false information, it seems. So education can be manipulated to basically disregard the lives of certain groups of people at the ruler's whim. So I started to get this concept that education, controlled education, was more of a mind enslavement tool than it was useful. But um, uncontrolled education, where we go out and educate ourselves in the things that we would like, is very healthy. But I think that people who want to educate themselves in the things that they would like get enslaved into educating themselves in the system because they are programmed that that's the only way that they can get ahead in the system, and they don't realize that. So I think after reading this, it validated a recent, not so long ago, fear of mine that the education system was used for these malicious ways.
For me, I my view on education was that it was a place where people were supposed to be learning what and what for. I have no clue, but I knew there was a place that I was supposed to be learning, but I placed like zero faith or effort into so-called the education I received from K through 12. And my college education, I also put very little effort into that because the stuff I was educating myself around, it wasn't stuff I really cared about, to be very honest and blunt. I was studying social welfare, which my school claimed was like the route like to go if you want to help people. But now I view education as very similar to how Amos and Wilson views it, as the only true education that exists is education that is teaching a person how to protect themselves and how to sustain themselves and protect their people, protect Black people. If your education is not meeting those things, then it's not really education. I think it's really interesting how Amos and Wilson says that about education, and it's very, very similar to the logic that Neely Fuller brings to the table on how education should be about producing justice, balance between people. And so that is my answer. Anyone else like to answer? How did you view education before and after reading this section?
Yes, of course. So one of the things that before I started reading this, I associated education to, again, like what others had said prior, is to an institution or to a place. And I think one of the things mentioned too, like education is everywhere. You learn everywhere, and you can educate someone else whenever and any time and place. So I think now after reading this section, it's just like you don't have to like just go to college or go to a quote unquote school, right? Like to get certified and all of these things. But in order, like you can go anywhere to gain knowledge, basically. Like everyone says like, oh, if you want to learn something, just go on YouTube. And I'm a firm believer, go on YouTube. I've learned so many things off of YouTube. And one of the parts that I really enjoy too is that you can learn from anyone and anywhere at any time and place, which I really enjoyed, because sometimes I got to like, especially going looking into this like counter racist content, it's been like, oh, I don't want to learn from white people, but they be holding some gems sometimes. In the book it talks about learning from them, so it's very interesting and turned my outlook on education.
Yeah, I agree with like especially what Ray and Sandra said. I think for me, it like reaffirmed a lot of my ideas too about what education is. I think when I went to college is when I realized like, oh, like you don't really learn in college, like this is all fake. And I think from there I was able to like gain an understanding of what it means to really be educated. And I really like the way that I always thought about it, but I like the way that this book frames it as like education in the form of like, learning all you need to know to like produce justice. I also really liked that this chapter talks about not just education, but the process of learning. Because I think a lot of times people talk about, oh, everyone learns differently, but they don't actually like implement it in that, like, if people really learn differently, then everyone has different milestones, and therefore you can't force people, you can't expect people to be on the same trajectory as you. And I like the part where he says like, be persistent, keep asking questions. And yeah, I just found this whole chapter to be really useful.
Anyone else like to answer? I would appreciate if everyone attempted to answer the question. Everyone should be participating in this discussion, study.
Yeah, I'll go. In short, yeah, I used to think education was this very formal thing and only certain people were certified to educate others. But even, obviously this group every week and people sharing information with each other is education. So has, yeah, opened my eyes to that. But I think I kind of internalized that before just from being in this group for months now. But yeah.
And I would add, I agree with like the points that were mentioned about college and university being a form of education before reading the text. And I would say after reading the text, that you're always in school. Like this right here could be a form of school. And don't be afraid to learn from the usual suspects.
Yeah, going back to what Ray said, when I first moved over here, I learned some very constructive information from a racist suspect, and within like days of moving up here. So definitely learn from anyone on planet Earth, anyone with a brain, I believe. And did anyone else like to answer before we move forward?
Yes, I would. I just wanted to make sure everybody else went. Everybody else got a chance to talk.
Go for
Um, what I just wanted to say was what I learned about it. There's many things. So first off, my view of education before I read the codified definition of it was I had already developed this mindset that the only stupid question is the question that you didn't ask. So I always like to question things and try to encourage other people to question things. And I had a high value of self-education, right? Like you, when I went to college, I looked at the courses that they told me I needed to take. If it didn't look like it was a course I was going to learn anything from that I wanted to learn, I didn't take it. I just picked the classes that were of interest to me, that I felt I was going to learn something that I could apply to, to what I was trying to do at the time. And then my dad told me that if he said basically, if white people wanted to hide information from you, they were going to put it in a book. So you need to read books. So I was always into reading like self-help books. Like anytime I like to help me solve problems, I watched my dad use a lot of books to help him solve problems in the household. Like when we raised chickens, he didn't know how to raise chickens, and he got some books from the library on raising chickens, and we raised chickens. This is the same thing with growing vegetables, like a garden and everything, what have you. And then in my martial arts training, I came across Jeet Kune Do, and Bruce Lee's way of training was like, don't try to learn everything. Just, look at the different styles of martial arts and take what works for you and discard what doesn't. So when I came to the code, and he was talking what he was saying about education and how you could use it to solve problems, it just kind of just really like added more to it, that just made it all click for me to be like, okay, this is what following the logic is like. This is I'm basically on the correct path of learning. So and then looking at the universe as being my school, or the place of education, was always there. But I did have this negative aspect towards I didn't call it the system of white supremacy, but I did call it the system. So I always believed that a lot of the education that they would give us in school was mainly to keep us from learning what we really needed to learn to help us solve problems. So it's just right on time for me when I read it. So okay, I'm done.
Yeah, thank you everyone for answering. I think it's really this part I meant to read before we got started, because it's really important piece of information that I hope it sticks with everyone. This is from 104, and the code says explanation. It has been said the person who does not know one thing knows another. There's reason to believe that if a person has a brain, it is likely that he or she knows something that someone somewhere does not know. It is likely that most of the people in the known universe as individual persons have acquired some knowledge about something that could be passed on to someone else. There is reason to believe that in order to promote the production of justice and correctness, it is the duty of every person in the known universe to pass on all constructive information to those persons who need such information in order to do constructive things. All people have flaws. No person is better than any other person. Greater knowledge and understanding of the truth can help a person minimize his or her flaws, the effects of his or her flaws, and or the effects of the flaws of others. This is the importance of like, not being embarrassed or afraid or victimized to the point that you can't speak up and share your experiences, share your thoughts, because you failing to do that is white supremacy. That's the white supremacist programming taking its effect, and perhaps many of the trauma that we have experienced in so-called schools coming to the surface when we can't bring ourselves to share our thoughts. There's no such thing as a stupid thought, BGQ, and I think everyone needs to practice not being a great spectator, but being a great doer, which is someone, it's not in a code book, but a great doer is someone who does things to counter racism. Just do things to counter racism, whether it's talking about it, being truthful about it, just sharing your experiences of how white supremacy is affecting you, has affected you. I just thought I wanted to share that. But does anyone have any thing to share before 108?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, go ahead, Ash.
Thanks. So for on 101, he says, non-white people, however, do not consolidate, constructively utilize, or efficiently exchange the variety of things that they learn from time to time. They do not record and store what they learn. They allow what they learn to filter away. And I was just wondering, like, what your guys' thoughts on this? Like, do you believe that the work that kind of is done right now by Black scholars, do you think because it's done in mostly like white institutions under white supremacy, that there's not really an incentive to bring it back to the community, so therefore they're not like producing constructive work? And I was also wondering, in the context of like Yurugu, she talks a lot about how like Black people use or like African centered thought uses oral traditions. And I would say that like this kind of, what he's saying is kind of like, like oral traditions are not efficient ways to like exchange information because they may be able to be like filtered away. So I was wondering what your guys' thoughts on that. Like, do you think that the oral tradition can be like used and not filtered away? Do you think it's still valid? And do you believe that Black scholars at least intend to consolidate this information?
As far as oral, oral communication, or how, speaking orally, I think that, evidence in history shows that it's not the most effective, because that is how we all don't know our history. I'm not saying that oral, can someone remind me how to say that? Oral what?
Traditions?
Or oral traditions?
Mhm.
Oral
yeah,
tradition.
the oral tradition, or just like passing down history like through like orally, not through written language.
So I think that that's proven through history. It's not the best method, just because things were passed down orally and different languages. It's hard to spread information for people to get information that way. They once upon a time were writing in stone, and that's shown that that has lasted time, but we don't understand it. I think that he definitely makes a good point. As far as the scholars go, I think that maybe they're just using the best technology available to them. Unfortunately, most of it's in a book, and like Dr. Senki said, if you want to hide something from Black people, put it in a book. So maybe make cartoons out of it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely believe in I believe like passing down I believe oral traditions has like some spiritual meaning and necessary aspects to it. But as for solving the problem, I think the information needs to be stored in multiple areas, so that if the white supremacists destroy one area where the information is, hopefully some of it can survive elsewhere. So I think oral tradition is it makes sense from the African mindset and the African worldview, but mixing it with white supremacy, it just allows white supremacy to be more powerful, because they will write down and catalog everything, all their rhetoric, all their words. They use it and they stockpile it everywhere and they spread it across the globe. And we need to be on that same wave, I believe.
And just to echo O5, one of the things too, when I think of Black people, especially like scholars or those who are in education, who produce work there, hopefully not just for like a grade or just to get out of the program, but even thinking of myself now as thinking, I've been also, although I'm working on my thesis, I'm also thinking about how to get this off of paper into like production, and just make sure it's fluid and on different platforms. But I think that's where it comes into like education. I'm not like the institution education. It's kind of just like this path where like you do all this research to either graduate or to get a certain grade on it or whatever, and it kind of just stays there because you're already moving to the next thing that you need to research or the next thing you need to go into, or the job that you've been waiting for, or the, you know what I mean? So it's like these steps in there, but there's no step in there where it's like, hey, you need to get this to the world. Like, I don't know how many research, like the goal for research is for others to read, but it seems like the goal for research is just to do the research, put it on some platform in somebody's library, and then get your degree and move forward. So there's no like execution part of it or the doing part of it. It's just like, hey, I'm just gonna do this research and that's it. So I've been actually thinking about that a lot lately, is the doing. Like, although I am doing a lot of research now, I don't plan on, like Neely Fuller says, like you can't just sit here and study forever. Like there's time to do the action. So that's one thing also that I learned in the education section, is like, although we're going to sit here and study and study, it's like we need to actually put things in motion. Because one of the things I keep saying this week was, so what have we done? You know, what have we done? We've read these books, but what have we done? Like, what have we produced? And I think it's very important to keep that in mind as well. It's like, what are you producing, where, how, you know, and it's okay if you have one viewer, but it's just like getting the production out there. So yeah, that was a great points.
Welcome.
I'd like to add on to that point. On the passage that Ash had read, it also continues on page 101. It says, they do not pass on constructive information willingly, deliberately, constantly, and efficiently to those who need it most. This is one of the reasons much of what non-white people once knew has been lost or forgotten. And adding on to that passage that Ash had read, I think it's a good thing that this, these sessions take place, and then 0526 has the foresight to record it just in case we don't get the problem solved. And then also with the point 0526 made on it was on 104, it was saying about how individual persons have like a piece of knowledge that could be like everyone here participating right now might have a piece of information that could help everyone in this session. And that's all I got for right now.
Well said. And I also really appreciated what you said, Ray. Yeah. Does anyone have any welcome, Ben? Thanks for joining us. Anyone have any things they'd like to share, insights?
Yeah, one of the things I would like to add is on page 102, where it says, do your best to make available to young people all of the most constructive information that you have acquired and that you seek to acquire. And I think this was very important because although we are making content, like we have to also think about what Ash talked about earlier, is how can everyone digest this information and receive this information and learning types. So like, so I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Sorry. So one of the things too is thinking about young people. They may not be able to, but have the capacity at that point in time to digest an entire like research article. Because sometimes, as we know, like your Rugu, like sometimes the research article isn't easy to read, or I wouldn't say easy. It's not for everyone, you know. So it's like being intentional about what we are producing and how we are providing young people with constructive information.
Yeah, and I think I forgot. I wanted to comment on what Dan read about teaching the young kids what they need to know. I believe if all of us here were taught the truth about white supremacy as children, we would be much probably in more constructive positions than we are now. If the people, our so-called teachers, had did what they were supposed to do, which is to teach us the truth. But I got no mention of white supremacy from K through 12. I may be alone in this experience. If I am, then I think that's surprising. But if someone has any teacher who mentioned white supremacy to them, the truth about white people waging a war against all non-white people, yeah, go for it, Mister.
I did. I had one at when I went to Berkeley High. Professor Navies, Richard Navies. He was taught African studies. He talked about that a lot because every year they were trying to shut the program down. Like every year, they were trying to shut the African studies program down. And he was always trying to motivate us to see what they were doing. And each year he would tell us they would lay down, him and the rest of the staff in his department would lay down these tactics or strategies that they wanted us to do in regards to keeping the classes, keeping the department going every year. Because like the counselors, even the black counselors, like I remember my counselor was trying to discourage me from taking the classes. So like they would have the school would have if they basically had to have a certain amount of students request the class every year in order for the classes to stay there. If they didn't have any students wanting the classes, then that gave the school enough means to just get rid of the class. And eventually, if they didn't have any classes, they could get rid of the whole department. So Mr. Navies used to they'd have these big parties kind of like thing. They'd have plays and like these parties that all the students would come to. And then we'd be all into the play, watching the play and everything. At the end of the play, he'd say, look, this is what you guys need to do. If we're going to keep the programs going, this is what you got to do. The enemy is at work. They're always at work. So you got to, but that was it. That was ninth, not even ninth grade. That was 10th grade and 11th grade. All the other years in school, no, there wasn't. I didn't have really any struggles. I had some white teachers who were like with the Green Party, and they would point out what was going on in South Africa and what was happening to the Palestinians and stuff like that. But as far as openly speaking out against white supremacy and saying that was the enemy, no. And I doubt very seriously if we'll ever have that as long as the system is in existence. The enemy is not going to teach us too much about what they're doing, for us to figure out a way to dismantle it. But yeah, all right, blah, blah, I'm done.
I agreed. Once we start getting ineffective numbers, it will not, like, countering racism will not be on the curriculum, but we will have to be able to sneak that into the curriculum. We'll have to. It won't be in the curriculum, but we will have to discover ways to teach kids the truth. I've attempted. I've had little success in getting in front of the children. Like, I know how to get in front of the children. It's just about having the right information to tell them. Do you think it was constructive for you to be learning about that as a youth, Dr. Sankey?
Oh yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I learned, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I learned already from my dad before I got there, but to be there and to be amongst other students who were also taking the information in, have peers who were receiving the same information that I was receiving about our history, and Mr. Navies, he taught in a way that he wanted us to look for problems that our people had collectively that we needed to solve. He'd always tell us, you guys are our future. You're the future. You guys are going to be the future leaders of our community one day, and this is what you need to be doing to help our people out. So I did find it to be constructive, and actually, when I missed it, it turned me upside down because I was no longer. I got kicked out of Berkeley. And speaking, since we're on education, right? Two examples that I noticed, right? So I grew up, I came from Richmond, California, and my parents was putting me at Berkeley High. And at Berkeley High, they were teaching the students. Now, I guess it was, you call it collateral, it's not collateral damage, but I'm learning constructive information at Berkeley High because the majority of the students there were white. So it's like whatever constructive information I'm getting, I'm getting it because most of the students there were white. And then when I got kicked out and I had to go to Richmond High was preparing the students for the penitentiary. Okay, they're preparing the majority of the students there to go to San Quentin, while Berkeley High was preparing the majority of the students to go to Cal Berkeley. It was like a total different thing. And so when I got to Richmond and I lost all of that, that support that was there because of Mr. Navies, I totally, I remember I was looking forward to going to San Quentin. It was like totally, totally flip.
Yeah, I can relate. I also look forward to going to prison as a youth for sure. It's part of our program, our brain trashing niggerization process. That's what it is right there. Anyone else share something?
Yeah, this part for me in particular is something that I've struggled with, as far as getting young people to like learn about the problem. I have a lot of younger siblings, and I don't want to say excited, but as soon as I learned about the problem, I wanted them to start learning about the problem. I want them to start countering it. And I know I definitely wasn't effective in the way I was going about it, because evidently none of them have caught on. I frequently see my younger brother, and to me, I don't really know much else to do except read a book. And, if I'm giving you the readings, I'm trying to pique your interest in it and I'm providing you with the material, but he doesn't want to gravitate to it. He doesn't want to pick it up. So that's something I struggle with. When he was saying about what the code was saying about, having, therefore is correct that they have available to them many things that will interest them, that are likely to have the most constructive effect on the way they think, speak, and act. So, I try to, limit things. I try to give them more resources, but it just seems like they don't want to pick it up. And still something that I struggle with today with educating the youth.
I think
I think one thing about this book is that it is written earlier, and I feel like the creativity or like the curiosity in kids that he talks about is like has reached all-time low, and I think it's a lot harder to like reach them compared to like when this book was written, in my opinion, because I feel like a lot of kids are like in the matrix at like 5 now or something, and so much of their creativity and curiosity is lost. So I'm wondering too, like what are other ways and tactics to get younger people aware of the problem and also interested in like talking about it.
I suspect it's going to have to come in the form of a video game or
No.
some kind of animation or something along those lines in order for them to grasp it now, because as a person said about them, you know, being stuck in the matrix is 5 years old. Like I look at children, even my grandson, he's 6, but he's had a cell phone in his hand since he was 3. Like he's already just plugged in. And I noticed that there's a few video games that kind of I guess they really promote confusion, these ones I'm thinking of, but they touched on some Black history, like this one called Assassin's Creed. I don't remember which one it was, but they got
Is
Black
it the one
characters.
where you're like Egypt or something? You're a Black character in Egypt?
He gets on a ship and he goes around and he frees slaves from these different islands.
Yeah, that's number 3.
And then you got the other one, that one Mafia 3, where it was a guy that came back from Vietnam or something. But if we had that kind of, and to my understanding, I guess you can now. There's a lot of technology out there where you can just make a video game, but it seems to me that that's kind of like the way you have to go if you want to reach the younger ones these days.
I think you're correct.
Yeah.
ISIS paper says that the people who will solve this problem will come from all walks of life. So that means we'll, in an area of entertainment, we must have counter-racists creating video games that has the messages of replace white supremacy with justice. Because I played video games my entire life, and I can promise you that every single one, the majority of them, promote white supremacy, which is mistreating people, killing people, celebrating death, violence. Well, that's literally video games where you can play, where you can like chop someone up, feed them, and then feed that body to someone else. You know, and it's just, this is what children are learning in video games. And this is like, they grow up, they like what CNQ said, a 6-year-old with a cell phone. I see cell phones as like having like a white person in your pocket or your mind at all times, brain trashing you. So cell phones are very, 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 I would say deadly for children to have, and this is why our offspring does not have one yet. I think
go ahead.
I just wanted to add something really quick too, like just to answer like how can we reach the youth? And one of the things that I keep coming to mind, I keep preaching, is like we have to kind of reach them where they are. Like everyone is different. I think one of the things I've learned too with the code book is that it's an independent walk and everyone's at different stages in their life. And again, when it comes to the education area, everyone is at different levels of education. So it's important that when you talk to someone who's 3 or when you talk to someone who's 7, it's going to be a different conversation for each one, although it's going to be the same like message, if you will. Like you might could say like, hey, white supremacy is killing blah blah blah, or white supremacy is like attacking you and you're a victim, to someone who's like 10. But if you say that to someone who's 3, they might actually just get scared and not even want to turn to the material, like, oh no, I'm scared of this, like I'm very terrified, you know. So I think it's very important to not only like just reach people where they are, but also figure out ways to do so. And sometimes it might have to be, unfortunately, in a form of a game. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be in a form that a game that you bought from a store, but you can make up a game that with your kids or with your people around you, like, hey, I made up this game, let's try to play it. Teach them the game, and then boom, counter-racist content, something like that. Like you just gotta be creative with things. You can't just, or you can create a poem or a story and then share it with them. Just things like that, where it's like, you might have to put a little extra work, but I think it's very necessary and needed.
Yeah, like for example, I'm writing a book that will not have the word racism, white supremacy in it at all, but it's all about racism, white supremacy, and the death, chaos, and destruction that it causes people 24/7. So this is what we all folks will eventually need to be doing. All of their content and whatever they produce must be coded with producing justice. We need like a just how they have propaganda attacking us 24/7, we need truth propaganda being spread through the masses. This program is one avenue that we are working on, but of course it must get bigger and it must remain consistent.
Or a cartoon TV show of someone trying and considering to produce justice in ways they can do it. But I know there's hard, considering there's not a lot of networks that'll probably carry it due to the fact majority of networks are, white owned.
That's exactly what I was just thinking. You almost took the words out of my mouth. Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck. And some of you younger people may not know about Daffy Duck. He was a black duck, and he was greedy. He was selfish. He was
Obnoxious.
conniving, and he always got his beak blown backwards. He always got abused in some shape, form, or fashion. And the white Bugs Bunny was always outsmarting everybody and right across the board. It reminded me of the study that Dr. Welsing did, where it showed the shades of colors of faces of the young girls and how the black 3-year-olds, they asked the white girl, which one is pretty and which one is smart. And she went right to the white girl, and the little 3-year-old black girl did the same thing. And so just how deeply ingrained, those cartoons are. We need some cartoons, black cartoons that promote that. We all spend all our days as kids watching cartoons, getting those messages ingrained in your brain, subliminal.
Agreed.
Can I add something to that before you go? Before you switch?
Yeah, but let's try to keep it in an area of education. But go for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, all of this to me sounds like we're still in education to me, but the sister mentioned stream network, and I just wanted to say that right now we do have the technology to have our own streaming, where you can set up your own streaming, and to have a cartoon is an excellent idea. A cartoon that's educational, right? Or even video games that are educational at the same time, but along the lines of the code, like we can find ways to, reinterpret the code in a way that even a third grader could understand it, is what I remember Dr. Welsing saying one time, or was it Mr. Fuller? But that's it.
Yeah.
One quick thing too, just to add. One thing I would like to mention is that even as we're talking about TV and commercials, like education is the aspect of like learning. So you can learn a lot of things from anywhere. And as we're talking about doing like TV and shows, there's the YouTube, and they teach you, a lot of white people on there are teaching you how to make TV. What is it called? I cannot. Cartoons, thank you. Teaching you how to make cartoons. So if you're interested in that, I would say go to YouTube and start making some counter-racist content, because remember, we are doers and not just gonna study the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and when I was very, very brain trash, I made a cartoon by myself about nonsense. So we have artists in this book club. We could write. It could be something as simple as just people going throughout the galaxy solving problems without creating more problems. Bam, that's a counter-racist cartoon. People seeking people out who need help and helping those people. And these people could be magical creatures from across the galaxy. There's just so many things we could do to get our true propaganda out there. And so
yeah, I just wanted to say, like, if anyone is really interested in doing a counter-racist cartoon, comic, etc., I would love to be a part of that. Like, I'm not kidding, for real.
Well, I'll be in touch, Miss Ash. I want to ask a question about something from, I think it's 103. Let's see what it is. Okay, this is from 103. and it's regarding so-called parenting, and it says I'm referring to offsprings. Tell them that since you have so far failed to provide this protection, maybe I should I should start from earlier. Let me see, where should I start from? All right, maybe I should read the explanation, then I can skip. Explanation: when speaking with young people and older people, tell them everything that you know that is of constructive value. Do not tell them anything or give them anything that does not serve a constructive purpose. Acquiring information is a constructive way of using time and energy by any person of age. When they have the ability to understand what you mean, tell them that it is the racist white supremacists who are their bosses, and that it is the racists who have the parental authority over them, over you. And then it continues from 103. Tell them that since you have so far failed to provide this protection, then you have not so far earned the title of parent or the function of being regarded as a parental authority. Tell them that you can try to work in partnership with them to try to overcome the awesome and very real power that the racists have over your existence and theirs. So this does make logical sense to, or do people have some different opinions on what is being said?
It definitely makes sense. I just, I think the age plays a big role. I don't know if you can, go around telling the 6-year-old, like, don't call me your parent, white supremacists are your parents, I think that this is important, and it, puts things into context, but I think that age part is definitely, so some kids, they're much more aware for whatever reason, so they can digest that stuff and process it better than other kids. But some kids will just kind of, I don't know, might run away, start doing what they do on those cartoons, those crazy things like mailing people, I don't know, sending people mail, run away to people's homes, saying I don't have parents, stuff like that. But I think definitely the age is important. Not age, but just whether or not they're able to grasp it and really truly understand something like what you're telling them.
If I can comment on it, I've done it. I did that with all three. When I first got the code, I had two. Well, I still have them, of course. A daughter. My offspring. At the time when I got the code, my son wasn't even born yet. If I use the code properly, my male offspring wasn't even born yet when I got it. And I had two female offspring, and both of them, I taught them that way. I'd hit them every day on the way to school, trying to explain that process to them. And then I explained that to my son as well. But it was kind of difficult with the other parent, so to speak, in the household who didn't follow that same kind of concept. And then there's still the outside world, like the other children that they come into contact with, who have their own different perspectives and stuff like that. So that interfered with a lot of what I was attempting to do with what the code said. Now that they're so-called adults, a lot of this has come back to them, and they're like turning that, they're taking themselves out of the brain trashed mindset that they had acquired from being associated with their peers, and trying to get back to what I was talking to them about. But it was a very difficult process. So I recommend that if you can make sure that your whole circle, or not, at least 3 or 4 elders have this codified knowledge, it really helped the process a lot better, because there's more of a foundation there, you know?
Yeah, I can.
Definitely. I would agree. I think that's one of the hardest parts, being, you know, one of the only people that's trying to be codified, attempting to be codified, and nobody else is really on that. And also why, you know, I consider racism to be warfare, and like it's constant warfare, because you're having, you know, you're trying to codify, teach your children about white supremacy, yet all these different avenues. What racism, white supremacy is coming from every single angle the minute you're not, you know, you're not there trying to teach them. So it's, you know, the other kids, the other parents, that's warfare in my opinion. Yeah, totally agree.
I think that's kind of hard to do, in the sense of, like, if you and your child or your offspring is on code, and then let's say they go to school and a teacher's like, "Where are your parent?" And you be like, "My parent? You mean my partner?" You know what I mean? Like, then what? And then they're gonna question y'all thought process and how y'all function, and then it just will become like a big uproar. So I feel like if that was to happen, kind of do it at home, in a sense, where y'all know y'all both on code, or you and your offsprings are on code, as opposed to in the outer world, because you are working and functioning in the system.
Um, the code says to refer to offsprings and so-called parents as offspring, and attempting parents or the parents, not partners. They say that we're gonna work in partnership, just to clarify that. But yeah, that makes perfect sense. From my understanding of children and conditioning, I think a child can be conditioned to believe and do anything. So they can easily be conditioned and taught the truth, and that truth will not cause them to hate white people or to be afraid of white people. It would just give them the understanding that they need to maneuver and maneuver this white supremacist society that they were born into, thanks to whoever the offspring, the birther is, or
Yeah, I definitely learned to just be persistent. A lot of times when I start speaking codified language, people, I get the feeling, you know, this is just a feeling, nobody's described it, but I get the feeling, oh, here he comes again, that racist talk. Nobody wants to be bothered with that. Oh, here we go again, another 3-hour lecture on why racism's bad. You know, so I'm just gonna, you know, not give up, be persistent, and make sure that, you know, hopefully it'll stick one day, you know. Hopefully it's not when, you know, they say Black people want to come and get this information is when they're, you know, distraught and devastated. Hopefully it's not then, but if it has to be then, I don't know. Let's hope for the best.
Is the whole system of marriage, Western marriage in this country, unnatural and dysfunctional? The whole, just, you know, putting, you know, I got papers on you now, and so it doesn't,
Okay.
does it represent ownership, a form of slavery even? Because now my relationship is beholden to and regulated by the state. And why do I need an outside supremacist influence to dictate my marriage, especially if it's some religion that's not my natural religion? And so that has something to do with why I never got married, because I just never felt like it was a natural thing. I think like it was like it's a forced institution. It's a form of imprisonment.
well, the system is already a prison, but prisoners of war, as Neely Fuller has stated, cannot get married. So it's actually can be dangerous for black for victims to view themselves as husbands or wives. They can pretend like most Black people pretend to do a lot of things under the system of white supremacy. But is it a true marriage? Can that wife and husband truly protect themselves under the system of white supremacy? Logic says no, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Ben. Yeah, I feel somewhat the same way. To me, I understand it. You know, that the whole Western marriage thing to be like a business transaction, so it's not really doesn't really satisfy, you know, the whole spiritual or whatever you want to call. You know, it doesn't feel satisfying. Definitely.
Well, it's not just in the West, it's in the East and the North and the South as well. You know, according to counter-racist compensatory logic, the entire planet is a prison system for injustice in which all non-white people on this planet are prisoners. So what Mr. Fuller attempted to do was to talk about marriage for non-white people as an attempt. Non-white people are attempting marriage, meaning that in the process of attempting marriage, they're also attempting to get rid of the prison system of racism, white supremacy. They're supposed to be doing both of them at the same time. But as long as the system of racism, white supremacy exists, it's just an attempt. You know, as a prisoner, you can't look out of the prison bars at the warden who is married and then try to pretend that you are married as well. You don't have all the benefits that are associated with that. So it's not just a Western thing. If I can be so bold as to, you know, get rid of the whole Western aspect of the conversation, it's the fact that non-white people are victims of racism, white supremacy. And victims cannot be married under this system. The only way that they can attempt marriage is to also, in the process of attempting marriage, to also be attempting to get rid of the system. You got to do both at the same time. I know I said that before. Can't say it enough. Can't say it enough.
I wanted to well, before I make a statement, does anyone have anything they want to share from the text, any insight, questions?
Yeah, I have something I wanted to say. I like the part on page 105 where he says, every so-called smart person has either directly or indirectly at some time or at all times received help of some kind from one or more persons who were not so smart. This does not conclude, however, that the smart person is, was, or will be a better person than the not so smart person. And I like that part because I think that sometimes a lot of kids also, but in general, everyone falls into this trap of believing that certain people are so-called smart and certain people are not smart. And that, like he talks about in this chapter about not thinking that, like when people tell you that you're slow or like retarded, to just understand that you like learn differently. And I think it's important because I feel like our society, we're at the pinnacle of like praising people. Like people praise like Elon Musk for being like so-called smart, but like he stole all of his knowledge from other people. And I think it's just like important that even if that person is so-called smart, what are they doing with their smartness? Are they producing justice? Are they even passing on their whatever information or knowledge they have to other people so that everyone can be smart? Because if they're just holding it onto themselves, then it's not beneficial, and that smart person is not beneficial on this planet.
And just to add to that, Ash, on page 104, it states halfway through a section, it says practice using what you know to help others to learn what you know and to use what is learned to produce constructive results. Growing up in the education system, from my experience, it has been like a competitive ground. And it's just like, yeah, you'll help like the fellow Black student in class. Well, I did. Like maybe it's your friend, but like anyone else outside, no, I'm not helping you, because it's like I was in some type of competitive mindset the entire way through school. And I felt like if I share this knowledge with you, then that means I will seem less, like if you do better than me or some sort of thing like that. So I just want to bring that up. That's one of the areas that I had to work on, especially going all the way through education into my master's. It's just like not always like withholding information, but under a system of white supremacy, they use it against you sometimes. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I also wanted to add, I also had that section marked down in my book, and I pointed out that it was childhood, because it did make me realize that a lot of the programming that happens during your childhood. So Ray said it best, it was some sort of like competitive nature. You're competing against each other when in reality, we should all be helping each other and helping each other to progress. And I also thought it was very interesting because, even though it's happening as a child, while we're children, I think now social media plays a big part in keeping, even adults in such a childish manner. So I thought that was very interesting. Everybody brags and gloats on social media as it is. And obviously that's just another form of maintenance and refinement of white supremacy. So I thought that was very interesting. And obviously we all were thinking the same thing because a lot of us had something to say about that part. So.
Well said, Kwaku, Jamal. I totally agree. That I don't agree. I understand that the system of white supremacy places us, like forces, victimizes us into literal child roles. We're child roles. We are all children of war. Children born into a war. And it's a very accurate way of putting it. I want to say comment on from 108. I have a question to ask everyone, but I gotta read a little bit first. So it's the code says, one of the most important things a person can do in his or her work to produce justice is to study and counteract with compensatory words and definition the ways that the words are used by racist men and racist women, white supremacists collectively. One of the most effective ways of countering racism is to speak the truth about racism by giving a detailed explanation of how a racist practices racism in every area of activity. A racist white supremacist dreads having his or her lies and deceitful activities exposed, particularly if the person revealing the truth and exposing the lies is a victim, non-white person. Racists usually become greatly, if temporarily, disturbed when their lies are exposed during a period when the lies must be believed in order that a particular plan to better promote racism functions effectively. Use words as scientific weapons. Study and use words, the definitions of words, and or the production of words in such a manner as to cause the white supremacist racist to decide to do one of the two things: replace white supremacy, racism with justice, balance between people, or kill all of the non-white people of the known universe. So my question is, does anyone have any other options? Any other options, or is this logical? All or nothing.
Well, there's the option that they continue to use, and that's to keep things going the way that they're going right now. Meaning that they'll go into a village of 100 people and kill 50 people and nurse the other 50 back to hell. That's what they're doing right now. So the objective of counter-racist code is to push white people into having to make that choice of either producing justice or killing all the non-white people, not killing half of them and nursing the other half back to health, killing all of them.
Yeah, I think these are the only options I'm okay with, TBH. What about someone want to answer the question? Is there any other options people could think of to solve this problem, or to escape, to free oneself from the problem, or is this what we need to do?
I would say, any option that I can think of, it obviously leads to another problem or another issue. So I think Neely Fuller and the code was very clear, that just in the most basic and fundamental form, those are really the only two options. So very well said.
I definitely cannot think of another option. I think that I would like to, move in a manner where these are the only two options that we have. Like Mr. Edwards said, the other option is to, keep doing what we're doing now. And that's not really an option for me.
How does everyone feel with these two options? What thoughts race through your mind? Are you really willing to die if that's our only choice? If they say, okay, we'd rather kill you all than produce justice, it's something you're okay with? I personally, I am okay with
I feel like we're gonna die anyway, so why not produce justice in this system? Of course, we're gonna go, but you will want to be doing the will of what you need to be doing in order to, you just don't want to live comfortable under something. You're going to live comfortable anyway as a spirit once your body hits the floor. So you might as well try to continue to try to produce justice, attempt to counter racism, because I don't see myself living comfortable in this earth while racism is still existing, and we still could have continuous issues going on until it's time for me to go. I might as well be putting in the work, doing the work to solve the issue.
Yeah, I wanted to add because I feel that, Carice. For me right now, it's already like it sucks being alive knowing what I do know, because I walk outside and I see some stuff and I'm, my spirit's shaking, twisted. I'm mad now, because I realize what it is and what's going on around me. And would I like to live the rest of my life like that? Would I like anybody after me to live the rest of their life like that? Absolutely not. So yeah, I'm comfortable with that option. If it means to truly be able to produce justice and correctness and balance between all people, I do it in a second.
Yeah, for like this is something that came into my mind. I was gonna save it for the next racism decompression talk, but this passage, but these two pages, 108 and 109, they're so like, I want to say like somber and really useful for like Black people who like have that, who have had that those thoughts. Because when I was getting into counter racism, there was a point where like for about 3 weeks where I was just like thinking about killing myself every single day, because the problem is just, it seems so vast. It seems like such a annoying problem to have to solve, and then I'm just like, I'll just get it over with. But then I refined my thoughts, and I just said I should just spend more time on trying to solve the problem. But I understand that a lot of victims of racism want to die, whether that manifests in them doing subtle suicide, slowly killing themselves via poison, or doing many of the things that harm their lives. I am certain a lot of Black people just want to die, and they don't have the words to express how they're feeling, and they don't have the perhaps know why they want to die. And it's just a reality that I have no problem discussing and talking about, because it's my reality. I was discovering the race problem, and seeing how, like, seeing this, understanding the state of victims, and how, like, just at any moment you can leave your house, you could be attacked, mistreated by a racist suspect, or a fellow victim. And it's just a very tragic situation. But I want to read this just to.
Oh, wait, can I add to that? Because it just, when you said that, it made me think about how the music of like the generation that's right after us is so suicidal, and so many of those young people are like, especially non-white, are like dying from drug overdose, etc. And it makes me think like we've reached a point in white supremacy where like people are born, even if they're not like obviously aware, they're like, they feel it in their spirit, something, and they're already feeling a desire to just give up, because they don't, maybe it's from confusion or whatever, but it's like, instead of killing others, now the violence is like put upon themselves. So everyone is just like, it's like a very suicidal world.
Yeah, and I was gonna read this for 109, because death shouldn't be seen as something that we are afraid of. It should be seen as a part of life. If you were born, you have to die. It's not that complicated or that scary. For me, I want to read this, and from 109, to kind of tie together what I just expressed. It says, the code says, it is correct for the non-white people to fight and resist the white supremacists, and to do so with a total confidence, knowing that whatever force that placed non-white people in the known universe will also keep non-white people in the known universe. If this does not happen, it will only be because the force that produced non-white people will have decided that non-white people should no longer exist. This decision, and that's in parentheses, I mean, it's in quotations, this decision, if made, should be entirely acceptable to the non-white people. The non-white people of the known universe will have done their duty. Even reading this for like the fourth time, I still get chills, because I believe we're all sent to planet Earth. We were all decided, or we're sent to planet Earth to solve the problem. And it's just, I think is understanding racism and white supremacy is very, like, it's tragic. It's a tragic experience. Truly learning how this thing works and what it does to people. But reading stuff like this gives me, like, energy. It makes me want to continue countering the problem and not killing myself, which is also an option.
Yeah, that part for me definitely, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like you said, give me power, to think of just, death is, for some reason, has been so scary for so long. But, just thinking about death in the same way you would think about it being like birth, non-existent, you're excited about someone coming into the world being birthed. You should also, have, similar feelings when somebody leaves the world and leaves the earth. So for me, that helped me a lot, and it helped with my resolve.
Yeah, and just to give an example, like my uncle just became a casualty of war about 2 months ago, and had I been like more confused about the situation, I probably would have responded differently. But I understand that he was a casualty of war, and it's much better than him being off the planet and the state that he was, than being on the planet in the state that he was. So, yeah.
And I was saying to add, I think that the fear of death is scripted in the brainwashing, the program that we have, and I think it's scripted in that program so that we can spend more money on funerals and make the white supremacists more rich. So I think that a lot of people that are fearing death are actually already dead, in a sense, because they're not really here fighting for anything. They're just complying with orders. You know, they're just like a computer program. Somebody programs them and they go a certain way because the only thing that they want is to basically just exist, but they're not interested in evolving if someone else is pulling all the strings. So I think that if you switch to being afraid of not being making an impact while you're alive, the fear of death kind of melts away, because people, I don't think, are so much afraid of death, but the fact that they've been living as a program their whole life and haven't really lived a fulfilled life, they don't really have another chance. So they were really dead while they were alive.
Yeah, that's true, Sandra. I feel like people are not scared of dying. I just think people are scared of not doing anything before they die. So if you feel like you're scared of not doing anything while you're living, then why not just try to attempt and counter racism in this racist war that's going on?
Anyone else like to share something from the text? Questions, concerns?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the idea of a slow learner. Instantly, when I read that, quickly started to apply it to my life, because I've felt that, for some reason I'm unable to catch on to things as quickly as others do, or as quickly as I should. So I definitely consider myself a slow learner. It just when it applies, not to beat myself up about it, or not to, frustrate myself. Just understand that, that I'm a slow learner, and by being persistent, I will be able to, learn. So, and that reminds me of something that Ray brought up about, the competitiveness, and practice using what you know to help others to learn what you know, and to use what is learned to produce constructive results. Um, I, I've always felt that when I learn something that I feel is of constructive value, I've always wanted to, spread it to others, teach people about it. But I haven't always had the patience or the persistence to, teach people those things. For whatever reason, maybe they're disinterested, or, maybe I'm just getting frustrated with them for whatever reason. But I feel that now I'm able to apply, so they're slow learners. So all I need to do is be persistent, and not to, use it as, like to demean them or anything. I don't think there's anything wrong with being a slow learner. A slow learner is you just, being honest about your capabilities like that. And this is a little bit difficult for me to grasp. So I'm a slow learner. You got to go slow for me.
Yeah, I wish I had this book when I was trying to teach my my cousin many years ago, because I would get so frustrated with his inability to pick up on what I thought was simple, but I was just totally brain trash at that point, and I was just like did not have the patience to work with young people, and he would just infuriate me by not knowing how to do math and not knowing how to learn it either. And I would yell at him and all that stuff, probably traumatizing him more and making his learning process even more unattainable. But that's white supremacy 101 right there. So I'm really glad to like have this now and attempt to practice more patience, because I am also a slow learner in some areas, but when it comes to like I guess logic and like hearing information, and I'm able to look around and contextualize this information with reality, then I'm gonna, all right, that makes sense. I've learned that now. But a lot of people can take information, and yeah, I'll stop there.
I'm a slow learner too. And what I've discovered over the years is that some of the children, like my daughter and the kids that she works with, become more thorough. We just want to be like, while everybody else has moved on, I'm going back to double check and make sure I got it right because I'm insecure about, I guess there may be some insecurity there, not so much a slow learner, but just not confident to say, hey, I got this, and I got to go back and be over efficient. And by that time, everyone else has moved on. So some slow learners end up, had I known and had that style of teaching, I'd probably have gone on to been a brain surgeon or something.
Just to add to that as well, it was funny because yesterday, was it earlier today or yesterday? I was talking to Kwaku and I was saying like, oh yeah, I'm not good at remembering like history things or whatever. And he's like, it's okay. You might just be a slow learner or something. And I was just like, oh, great way to use that. But one thing that I've learned about myself is that I know that I learn slow. So I've always been on 1,000. Like in education, I'm the one that will stay up late and study anything and everything because I did not get it with the 30 minutes I had for class. And that has been like, just knowing how I work now is like, dang, why do I always do extra work? Everyone comes to class, oh, I didn't read. I'm like, oh, I read that and some. And I watched a video. So it's just like all of these things that now I have, I guess, this work ethic or the way I do things has stemmed from this like idea of like, oh, maybe I learn slower, so let me just do extra work so I can understand it. But it's very interesting. It was a great point to make. Oh, and also I wanted to apply that to those when we are teaching someone or providing constructive information to someone. We have to understand when someone's ready to learn or to understand the information. Because if you're going to talk to a brick wall all day, you're not going to get anywhere. And it's again, like patience isn't going to save you. You're just wasting time. So I think it's very important, like instead of just like forcing information down someone's throat with them not understanding or wanting to learn, it's not even a constructive use of your time.
Agreed. Nana, yeah. When a student is ready, a teacher appears. I believe that's something saying like that. Someone was gonna say something.
Yeah, I also wanted to comment. Can you guys hear me?
It's when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Yeah.
Yeah, well, for me, the thing that resonated with me was the part of not being embarrassed to ask for help. I think I had an issue. I wouldn't say I was such a slow learner, but I had an issue when if I needed help with something, I wouldn't say I needed help. I would more so rather expect people to see that I needed help doing stuff. And for me, that kind of resonated as like common sense, like if I'm carrying something heavy and you see me struggling, but, the accountability comes from me not voicing or saying that I was in need of help, and it's more so me being embarrassed to ask for help. So I thought that was very interesting, that because it seems, for everybody else, it kind of resonated a little differently, but more so along the same lines. So just for me personally, those are the kinds of things that pointed out for me. Asking for help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help whatsoever. So a bit of insight for me on this chapter. I mean, Kwaku's laughing because he knows I do that to him all the time. So
Yeah. What
I feel the same way as Kwaku Jomo. I have a big issue asking for help. Like if I was in class, if I didn't know it, I'll fail gracefully. And that's just how the end of that will go. But it's because of when I was younger and I would ask adult or a peer of mine for help. It seemed like I never really got the help. So it just got to a point where no matter how many times I asked, I really wouldn't get help. So I just stopped asking. And um I feel like being let down for continues to ask for help was the fear of me not asking anymore. But eventually, if I continue to ask, eventually I will get the help. But it was just a hard time for me asking. And now to the point I don't ask anymore because I don't really kind of have a question or it just fades out because I'm so used to not asking, which was an issue. It's still an issue I struggle with, but it was a bigger issue.
Just to add to that, one of the things that I grew up with is my parents used to say, attempted parents used to say, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And that was just a statement that just ran through my house. And I always wondered, like, why has no one asked for help? And I always ask for help. Like, even if I'm like, okay, do you mind helping me with this, this, and that? But I only ask for help if I truly need it. Like, I will try my hardest to do it myself because that's just how I am. And I like to do things by myself. But if I need absolute help for anything, then I'll ask. It's absolutely my last resort, but I'm not afraid to ask.
Oh, and I'd like to add, I'm a slow learner too, but I also keep in mind underneath the system, like our brain power isn't, what it should be. But in the system of justice, we could probably, be capable of a lot more because I can't even read the code book as fast as I'd like. And I know it's a result of this system. And that's all I got for right now.
Yeah, I feel like this is a good segue into one of the next questions I have for the group. Yeah, we're talking about education. Education is supposed to make us so-called more intelligent, so-called smarter, so-called educated. But due to white supremacy, it does mostly the opposite. It brain trashes us and it makes us potentially full of self-hate. And so the question is, has anyone ever been made to feel stupid or dumb in a so-called learning environment?
Of course. Because I'm kind of the person that don't really ask for help and I just kind of figure things out on my own. It seemed like because I was never really a participator in class, um, people wouldn't want to, work with me because I might know a lot, I just don't say anything. Or it might just be like a brain fart in my head. It's something I'll forget. But it will kind of make me look like, oh, okay, she doesn't know what she's doing. Let's group over here. I was always left out to feel like I didn't really know what I was doing because I wasn't a big participant.
I had the same experience in school, except one of the things that I actually noticed was I feel like I didn't ask a lot of questions when I was in high school, but when I got to college, I had questions about everything and I wanted to correct that. And when I was in jobs, I had so many questions, but I always got cited for asking too many questions at that point. So I've seen where not asking anything gets me treated like I'm stupid, or, not engaging gets me treated a certain way. But then when I start to engage the way that I feel comfortable with, then I feel like there's a certain amount of bosses and teachers, and more so bosses than anything, but that is a part of the white supremacy system very directly, that get upset at the fact that you would be questioning something that you didn't know, because since they're so deeply entrenched in the system, they're trying to get you, they're trying to get you not to ask about it so that they can control you.
Yeah, Sandra, I do believe Black people victims of racism are trained to not ask for help and to not ask questions. So when white people or anyone sees a Black person asking questions, it's very disturbing for a lot of them, from my experience and from what I've been learning.
Can you repeat the question? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Edward.
No, I'm just listening. Periodically, I make sure that I am muted, so I'll unmute and then mute again.
Understood. So the question was, has anyone ever been made to feel stupid or dumb in a so-called learning environment?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's what we're taught, that And that's the whole point of training people to not ask questions. You tell them not to ask. When a child is born, that child is trying to find out as many things as they possibly can about what's going on around them. They'll ask many questions, many questions. So much so that people will begin to tell them to stop asking questions. Or they'll say, oh, that's a silly question. No such thing as a silly question. No such thing as that. As they get a little older, they're made to feel like asking a question is an admission that you're dumb. And then they attach certain feelings to that. Of course, it's an admission that you don't know the answer to that question. See, so by the time the child reaches puberty, they ask almost no questions at all. And by the time they're in adulthood, what's terribly tragic for Black people in the area of sex is ain't nobody asking no questions. They just want to get to the act. So getting used to asking questions, even to the point where you ask the best question that can ever be asked by anybody at that particular time, that's when you know you're onto something. When you are able to do that, that's when you know you're onto something. But I mean, yeah, all of us have been made to feel that way. And, because that supports the system itself. The white people who practice racism, white supremacy, don't want you asking questions.
Yeah, I was brain trashed to a degree from K through 12 in my college education that like the whole aspect, the whole thought of asking a question was like not something I had in mind. I didn't even think, hey, can I ask questions? I didn't even think to ask questions. I just listened and did what was told, or mostly didn't listen, and we just were poorly behaved children in K through 12 for the most part. But that's the training we got. We were like, and I was very scared immediately when I got to a white school, Paul Revere Middle School in Brentwood, and like the day I am in that school, they put me in a remedial class, which I did not need to be in because I was very, very intelligent despite me being Black. But I was put in a remedial class and I was learning we're reading just stuff that I feel like kindergartens can be reading. And we were in this class for like 2 hours and we're like, most middle school people have 6 periods, whatnot. I'm in this remedial class with no other white people, but just me and other Mexican kids and Black kids. I'm like, it's my first time around white people, and they're keeping. I'm learning stuff that I could be learning in elementary. So I felt really angry and that I was that my abilities were being thwarted, and now as I understand white supremacy, that's exactly what was happening.
Yeah, I was an average student in elementary school, doing pretty well, more aggressive than the others. And for discipline, that's what they would do. They put me in special ed, which is similar to, remedial, with really developmentally challenged kids. And I was not developmentally challenged. What a trap.
Yeah, they did the same thing to me.
Me too.
And my parents had to come up to the school. Well, my mother did, right? And so the teacher said, teacher told my mother, said, "Yeah, he really don't belong in here. So he can do the work. He just don't want to do it." You know? And that was the first time in my life that I recognized how other people view you, that other people are actually watching what you say and what you do, that other people in the process of watching what you say and what you do are forming opinions about you. People who have a certain amount of control over your life. That was an eye-opening experience for me. And I was like 9 years old. And so the result of that was, well, how do we get him to want to do the work? And the teachers really took an interest in doing that. I grew up in a neighborhood where it wasn't no white people. The only time I saw white people was on the TV. I went to a church, there wasn't no white people there. The school I went to, wasn't no white people there. And so these Black teachers actually took an interest in solving that problem. That was an eye-opening experience for me for the rest of my life.
And in what way?
Well, as a young boy, you know, in junior high school, you know, when I got a little older, it was in trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to show people about me so that they could form the correct opinions, meaning the opinions that I wanted them to form. See, at that time as a young boy, that's what I thought was the correct opinion, you know. But as I got older, I understood that, yeah, that's very manipulative. You shouldn't do people like that. You have, number one, you have to be true to yourself. You know, that's number one. You have to do that. And when I got older, I realized that. So the same thing that happened to you happened to me when I was in high school. I went to a different high school, and before I graduated, I went back to my, what they call the home school. And they put me in remedial classes. And the teacher was asking questions, and I would raise my hand. You know, it didn't take long for me to look around the classroom and see that I was the only person that was raising my hand. You know, it was like, yeah, these are really easy questions. Why aren't these people, you know, raising their hand? And the teacher had me to report to the vice principal and told him, hey, this guy don't belong in this class. You know, you need to put him in advanced classes. Now, that's not to say anything about me per se, but that's to say that after I gave up that manipulative, you know, play about showing somebody this because I wanted them to think that, you know, and started being true to myself, then I understood. And that's really what you're after. I mean, really, is understanding. Then I understood why it was so important for me to be true to myself.
Well said. Thank you for giving more insight on that. From 110, I want to talk about this. I think this could be very important. Is very important actually. And I'm going to read it first and then give my thoughts on it. And, among the people of the known universe, the white people who have chosen to practice white supremacy have proven to be the greatest producers of fiction stories, records of events that did not happen. The white supremacists produce and use fiction stories in order to get in the practice of thinking about making things happen that have not happened, but possibly could happen if they decided to make them happen. The white supremacists have become the masters of making things happen by first imagining that they could happen and or by imagining that they should happen. So just this is like a alert, like predictive programming. You know, it's like seeing something happen on the show The Simpsons, like the World Trade Center being blown up, and then 11 years later, the World Trade Center is blown up. So that's what predictive programming is. And due to my understanding of video games, all the video games currently that are really big involve killing and building and surviving. You drop down in the world and you fend for yourself. You kill everybody who's not on your team, and you just have survive. And I'm like, is this? Oh, the purge could be another example of predictive programming or something like this happening. I hope I am incorrect, but I don't put anything. I don't. I'm aware that the white supremacists, racist men, and racist women, they nothing is outside of what they will do. They are very dangerous people. So if they want some kind of purge like scenario going on, I believe it's very possible for them to create it. If they want some kind of like, well, we already live in a society where everyone kind of fends for themselves and dog eat dog world, but that can be even more intensified if they wanted to. And the stuff that we're seeing on TV, the stuff that I'm seeing produced in the video game arena, I'm like, wow, this is probably where they could be taking us. Not 50 years from now, but probably 100 years from now, we will be in some kind of um, apocalypse scenario where the white people have like finally gotten to Mars and the moon, and they're practicing racism there, and we're all down here fending for ourselves. But this is what this passage makes me
I
think.
think a lot of non-white places, a lot of non-white countries are going through the purge type scenarios right now where they're like given a bunch of weapons and then you guys kill each other and you have unlimited access to torture and kill each other until we tell you when to stop. So it's happening.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh, I would add on
Is
that
this
point. That sounds a lot like when Mr. Williams says they'll kill 50 and then they'll nurse the other 50 back to health on that previous point that was mentioned. And then one other thing I'd add for that point on 110 is I think that part goes a bit in our next section, entertainment.
Yes, definitely.
But,
I just had a question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to make a quick comment on it. When I read that part, I was kind of like thinking, so should I start reading fictional books? And I've never really been a fan of that kind of stuff, but I do after hearing us talk about it, I do understand the importance of like studying fiction, because like he said in the book, a lot of they're masters of making fiction fact, and I can't disagree with that. So I do notice when I am watching fictional things, like, oh well, that doesn't produce justice. Like obviously that doesn't produce justice, right? So it makes me think of, well, how can let's not make that happen so we can produce justice. Yeah, just my comment.
I would say because you have a lot of siblings that are going to be having to read like fictional things in very soon, and a lot of them are probably going to be really racist. It probably would be good to read it with them and decode it with them, because a lot of like the Uncle Tom's Cabin, To Kill a Mockingbird, these are like the standard books they read, and a lot of them are very racist. So that would be a good thing to do, I think.
Yeah, and they're gonna have kids read 1984 like in high school.
Yeah, I read that book that's actually the only book before I started practicing counter racism. That's the only book I had read actually was 1984. I didn't think much of it. I was like, oh, that's a bad government right there. Not knowing that our government is very similar to that and worse, but brain trashing 101.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that book was written by a former government intelligence officer. So he was like basically making a bunch of predictions that he thought was going to happen in 1984. But yeah, as you can see, a lot of that's happening now. We got the screens, we got all the screens with the cameras on them, the tail screens, you know. But I had a question I wanted to know. How come you didn't read, you read the notes, but you didn't read the suggestion?
For what page?
On page 110, when you read among the people of the known universe, but you didn't read study fiction, stories from person's imagination, you know, that part.
It may be because the you may be looking at the older edition. I'm on the revised. Are you on the same book?
Yeah, page 110 of the revised edition, or are you on the older?
I'm on the revised. I just read the notes and the white supremacists more than any other people. Yeah, I don't see explanation on this one.
See, on my part, before the notes, it says in bold, it says study fiction.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
Person's imagination for the basic purpose of getting ideas about what to do or say and what not to do or say in order to produce justice, balance between people. So it's like the notes are telling us the reason why we should study fiction, so that then it's kind of along the lines towards taking us back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about making video games and animation for the children. By looking at how the white supremacists do it, then it's supposed to give us the same idea to do it, but use it in a way to produce justice, or maybe even communicate to the youth how to produce justice. So that's why I was asking. Yeah.
Very good point. It does all come back, because I've kind of been getting out of this habit of like watching so much TV and movies, just because I feel like it's programming and conditioning, and a lot of it's made up. So I've been trying to get out of that habit, but this kind of like tells me not just watch that kind of stuff with the right intentions, right? Study with the purpose of studying it and coming up with ideas, not just watching it because you're bored or because you don't have anything else. You don't feel like you have anything else better to do with your time.
Exactly.
Yeah, or watching those things with the intention that I'm going to be decoding this, and you're seeing what messages what racist messages is this movie propagating, spreading, and also is this movie teaching any constructive lessons that I may be able to share with people. But for me personally, I definitely will not be reading any more fictional books besides 1984. I think it's much easier to watch a fictional movie than to spend my time reading fictional stories. I'm already brain trashed enough. I could barely read books about reality. So. Any more comments, questions from this section?
I struggle with trying to. It feels weird to me when I watch the TV. Like I'll get into something because of like the reasons that have been mentioned, like decoding it. But if I feel like it's wasting my time, if other people are watching it around me, I'll start to get like fidgety, like I'll feel weird about it. So I feel like it's important for me to watch TV, but not TV like nonsense, but to watch things that are educational and decode. But because I got out of the habit of watching consuming my time that way, I actually find it a bit difficult to run something on the same platform as I did before. Like I can watch YouTube videos on my phone and decode, but it's sometimes harder for me to actually sit on my couch and watch TV because it just registers to me as a waste of time. But step by step, but that's an interesting point that's brought up about how people use their time and the things that they choose to read and watch, not because a lot of people think, well, I'm reading, so that's good. But if it's something that really can't do you any use in life, then it's really just a waste of time. Maybe a couple good vocabulary words in there, but for the most part, it's a waste of time.
If only the masses of victims could see watching TV as a large majority of it as being a waste of time, I think that would be a huge blow to white supremacy. But the cell phone, the tiny white man, and the TV, the medium to big size white man are very powerful forces, unfortunately. I have a question for everyone. In the system of racism, white supremacy, is it possible to not have to rely on white people for anything? Like, is it possible for a victim to spend their whole life never needing white people for anything?
I for a quick answer, I would definitely say it is impossible not to depend on white people. You know, they have access to everything, you know, and they give us what we need, you know, when they decide to. So I would yeah, for me, I think, yeah, white people, unfortunately, yeah.
No, not
And
under
just
this system. No, it's impossible.
just to add as well, I think depending on what you're trying to accomplish depends on if you need to depend on white people. But under a system of racism and white supremacy, and to produce justice, you need to learn from white people in order to solve the problem.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar to what Ray said. I believe, you know, you can, you know, not depend on white people for something, but you're not going to, you know, get very far, or you're not going to receive a lot of constructive information or anything, you know, useful, because white people, you know, control that kind of information, and they have access to all that information. So you can spend a lot of time trying to get that information when you could just ask, you know, white people for it.
Was the question just depend on, were you just talking about depending on white people in regards to information? Or
Just in general, like, is it possible for a victim to navigate their existence without not having to rely on white people for anything?
oh yeah, it's impossible. I mean, look at us now. We're talking on the internet. We're using Zoom. I'm saying somebody gotta go to the store, get some groceries. You gotta put gas in the car, or you gotta get on the bus or foot it. But when you get to the store and you buy your milk and your whatever you buy to eat, it's coming from them pretty much. So
Yeah, that actually reminds me of I don't know if you guys have seen on Netflix Killer Mike, when he had that documentary, and he was like he was just shopping from black businesses, and he, you know, he struggled to find a lot of things, and that's just black businesses. But you know, and I'm sure that those black people, you know, some of them probably have loans from white people, right? So, you know, he kind of showed like you can't really get a lot from black people. You can't really get much without people.
electricity, water.
Yeah, I would definitely like to add, I'm definitely dependent on white people right now to keep my power on, to stay in here. And if like everyone in this call, we tried to build something, I don't know if we'd be able to do it with the knowledge that we've acquired from white people in our various professions or careers. That's what I would add.
Yeah, it's kind of like a trick question, because I believe we're all aware that white people control everything. Therefore, we are forced to be their accomplices and to rely on them. But this is a really important note from 116, and this is why I asked the question. It says, the code says, do not hesitate to ask white people to teach you and or to show you how to do things that need doing. Do not be embarrassed when you need to ask white people to tell you things that you need to know. Do not expect to receive of what you ask for and need. Do, however, continue to ask. So, great piece of advice. Uh, when I learned like last chat, well, like when I first read the economics portion, and he talks about tracking down people who have your last name and asking them for money because they may have their ancestors may have benefited from your ancestors being their slaves. So when I read that, I actually like did that. I got on Facebook and I searched up my last name and I messaged white people, hey, with my last name. And I asked them for money, I asked for compensatory investment. I said, hey, your ancestor may have like owned my ancestors, so like, can you potentially donate to me? Of course, I didn't get like a response or any money from that, but I will continue attempting to ask white people for money and for all the things I need because they have it. And that's just my little 2 cents.
That I shouldn't laugh, but because that's exactly what you should be doing. Dan put in "White People to the Rescue," and I have that song stuck in my head. I don't know if anybody else saw it. God, but I wonder if that applies too to like, when white people marry into your family, can you seek them out and request money from them and kind of, I mean, it's a compensatory investment, but is it kind of the same thing? Like, now are they kind of obligated? I mean, they should be.
In my family, I have Black people in my family and white people in my family. And generally, the white side always has more of a way to help when things go wrong than the Black side, as the Black side has been broken through the foster care system and so on and so forth. So it's always been acceptable in my family to ask the side that had the money, and sometimes they've even taken it upon themselves to help, because if not, I mean, the situation, they have some of them have extra property, and I'm barely trying to make it. I'm barely trying to survive at times in my life, and some people have more than one car, or some people have more than one property, or so. I think it's always acceptable to ask, even if the answer is no. At least you know where you stand and who's there and who isn't.
So, I'm thinking right now, is that constructive? I mean, it's not constructive, right? I think in the long run, interacting or marrying white people isn't deemed constructive, but Zeke does bring up a good point, as a Kwaku brings up a good point, I should say. Something to think about, I wonder what Neely Fuller would, I mean, I think I know what he would say. But.
Yeah, Sandra, if you have white people in your family, they definitely in your victim unit, they should be giving you money. And quickly, Jamal, did you just say that it can be constructive to be with white people? Like,
I was saying, I'm wondering if it can be constructive. I mean, obviously it cannot, in the long run, but I mean, if you're already in that situation, then I mean, making the most constructive use out of that situation, I guess that would be something very constructive to do, I guess. At least that's what logic is telling me.
yeah.
I think if you use the money to help counter racism, that would be the most constructive thing that you could do with the money, and hopefully the rest of your life will fall into place over time.
Yeah, for those family members who just absolutely cannot give up white people, now I'm constantly requesting compensatory investments from whoever that is. You know,
And if you use the money to help yourself, that is, I think that is countering racism. If you're a victim of white supremacy and you're using the money that you've gotten from a compensatory investment, you're asking the white person to invest in you to help you compensate for, the effects of white supremacy.
Kind of like when someone applies for a Section 8 or like goes to the county and asks for food stamps. I guess it's, a very similar effect.
No,
Yeah.
I think that's slightly different. In that case, you're asking the incorrect government, and then still it's not. Well, I'm just gonna say from my own personal experience, because I've done that before. I can remember a mindset that I had in my mind where I thought, well, they owe me this. But I had to go through deceptive, I had to practice deception in some ways to try to qualify. They got all this, when it comes to a compensatory investment request, you're being open and honest, and you're just making a request, and it should be a simple exchange. They say yes or no, that's it, as opposed to Section 8 and all that kind of stuff. I think that's a little bit different.
There's like a last resort type thing. I think personally, like if it's the only thing you have left on the table, then it's very similar going to, because this is the whole system is a white supremacy system. So if you're going to family that directly can help you, that's great. But if someone doesn't have the family, I guess I'm saying, that can directly help them, then unfortunately their family would be the system that people apply to get those things from, as they have run out of options. I guess that's in my mind, that's the best thing that they can do to try to get themselves back up on their feet, but they need to remove that as quickly as possible, once they have acquired the amount of knowledge to go out there, and function to where they can survive.
Absolutely. When I went through it, it did help me. I was just saying I wouldn't call it a compensatory investment request, but not saying not to use it to help. I mean, you got to use it. Use it.
Yeah, it's slightly different because it's an institutional building that exists to support, maintain white supremacy. That having to deal with these buildings, those institutional buildings, places the victims in the inferior position, and places the racist man and racist woman in the superior positions, because they are able to, feel good about so-called helping the poor victim who needs to come to the government building for resources. So that's where the difference from a compensatory investment, I believe, because it's white supremacy 101, whereas a compensatory investment could be one of the few times a white person can give a black person the help they need the most, which is usually mostly economics. Black people are very poor, very much poverty ridden due to race and white supremacy. So that's my outlook on it. Any more comments, questions about this section?
I did.
Oh, go ahead, Ezra. I mean, quickly.
I did have one section. I think it was about words and studying words. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. I don't know if I think it's on page 107. It's at the bottom. It says produce, use, and or define every word in such a manner as to best result in the revelation of truth, that which is, and then use the revelation of truth in such a manner as to best produce justice and correctness. So basically, the code is saying to use words in a manner that isn't confusing. I know it's somewhere in here. I just wanted to bring it up because, you know, I think I realized some of the programming, you know, that I had witnessed, especially in college. You know, writing a lot of papers and using language that was just confusing and absurd, you know, trying to use these big words. And I see it all the time, even, you know, a couple of associates that I have, even when they're talking or writing, you know, we're having a very, you know, plain conversation and they throw out words that, you know, it's just like, obviously I know what that means, but it's just completely unnecessary right now. All that was meant to do was just to either, you know, quotations flex, you know, or gloat that you know these words, or just to cause confusion because there could be a possibility that I don't understand what that word is, right? And then that even goes back into the bragging and gloating because, you know, most people do that in an instance, at least, you know, for me, you know, you use that in an instance to try and assert your, I would say assert your dominance, but, you know, seem like the better person. So I just thought it was very interesting. And, you know, and I wanted to ask you guys, you know, were there any instances that you guys can think of, you know, where people use very confusing language almost unnecessarily?
Oh, definitely. Every time I turn on CNN, and, you know, somebody's speaking and using words, you know, if you don't study what they're saying, it would definitely confuse you or, you know, deceive you. Definitely. And, you know, just with other people, you know, like you said, when people try to flex, I guess, or brag, uh, they use big words. I think that kind of goes into like these educated people, supposedly, like that, you know, it's like only people who are educated or reserved. It's like proving you're educated by using these big words. But definitely, I experience that, you know, every time I open up an article or I hear some racist suspect speaking publicly.
I decoded something really interesting today. I was listening to some news, and they kept saying backlash, facing backlash, and I'm like, wow, that's racist because I don't believe this white woman or this white man is getting whipped on the back. I don't think they're getting lashed on their back. So what freaking backlash are they talking about? It's just to remind Black people, consciously or subconsciously, of their brutalization during slavery and the brutalization happening right now. But words are always used to confuse or to, I want to say, trigger us. And also, of course, in college, many white professors, white students use big words that I sometimes I had to look up, but sometimes I was like, wow, I'm not even gonna attempt to understand what this person just said because it sounded like a bunch of jargon, which a lot of times white people are masters at producing.
But what about when somebody like Cornel West and Mike Dyson do that? You know, they're supposed to be our leaders and stuff and things, but I don't think they're getting across to the younger generation.
One of the things that I found as well, and I have experienced, is that people like to just talk. Like, I've always been a person to ask questions. And one of the things that gets people the most is when you restate exactly the same words that they use, like the same way they said it, the same way they use it, and they will swear on somebody's mom that they did not say that. I'm like, oh, so you said blah, blah, blah. No, I didn't say that. I'm like, what? But one of the things that I'm finding now is just ask questions. Like, I just continue to ask questions because it's very important to ask questions. And especially if we're talking about, we don't have leaders, but if we're talking about some leader or whoever, I think it's important to get in contact with them and ask questions. Because one of the things that I experienced with Kwaku, we went on a, not a talk show, we went on a, there was some talk or whatever at CSUSB, and someone appeared who was whatever. But anyways, the whole thing was that we went into this this forum and we asked questions. And I thought I was so alive at that moment, because we didn't just let this person go on and on for days without asking a question that is very important for them to answer and just to get information from. So it's very important to ask questions.
As far as, you know, Cornell West and like the people you mentioned speaking like that, I think they have an audience in mind. I don't really know much about Cornell West, but I don't. I just need to do more on him. But it seems like he's not really speaking to, you know, non-white people. I think he's speaking more for white people to understand. And you know, I believe that that's not the best use of your time.
Yeah, I think Cornell West is potentially a racially showcased person who uses a ton of words that may not be as effective as countering racism. So it's important to understand, to always remember what racially showcased people are and their uses, which is to not point people in the direction of countering racism.
Oh, I would.
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, I was going to say I would add in response to the Cornell West question. I would think that would be a little bit of entertainment, showing off to other Black people information that white people allowed them to obtain.
And then one of the things I wanted to add on page 118, it says about somewhere on there, do not place what was said or written by another person within a context that was not intended by that other person. I think this is very important because this can almost go as the same thing as assuming or making assumptions on what someone else has said or is telling you. I think it's very important too, like when we are speaking to someone and someone tells us something, that we take it for face value and not just put our own like intentions in it, our own perspective in it. Because sometimes we might say like, well, they're a nice person, but they just said some effed up stuff, and you're kind of just like, well, they're a nice person. They didn't mean it that way, you know, but in with real reality, they did. So I think it's important that we just really study words, but take it for what they say it as.
Agreed. I believe there's a reason that context is underlined, and that's something that I feel is always important when you're repeating what somebody said. Like, for instance, you know, I always use the phrase you're taking that out of context, right? Because that's not what that person meant when they were saying it. But the way that you're using it, right, isn't in the correct context, or it wasn't the way, like I said, it wasn't intended to be used like that. So I think it's very important that, you know, keeping things in context of what that person said, keep it in that context, do not change it.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. This is the last of my notes, but this last page at first was a bit confusing for me because he kind of was like saying a lot of the same things over and over. Always do your best to explain why you are saying what you are saying that is similar or the same as what you are copying from another without saying that this is what you are doing. Somebody has to break that down for me, because that one is, you know, yeah. Can somebody help me out? I'm a slow learner.
Well, can you repeat the question?
So that for this part on page 118, there's a paragraph that says, always do your best to explain why you are saying what you are saying that is similar to, or the same as what you are copying from another without saying that this is what you are doing. So does that mean I should I don't want to say deceit, obviously isn't the right word, but you know, go about, you know, paraphrasing or talking to people without saying you're copying what they're saying?
I just think the most important thing to remember from this is just to, if you are like um quoting someone or repeating someone's words, make sure you repeat them in an exact manner that they were said, and don't replace any of their words. And also to let people maybe know that you're getting your information from this person. Um, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but what page is that on again?
On 118, it's about one, two, three, four, about the fourth section down, or a paragraph, if you will, a couple of sentences. Is always do your best to explain why. Okay. One of the things that I've gotten from that section is um, normally when we talk, we kind of get our information from somewhere, especially say we're talking about counter racist content. We will probably refer to like books that we've read or content that we heard and things like that. But instead of saying like, I've heard this from Neely Fuller Jr., blah, 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 on this day, because he said this, it's being able to do your best to explain why you personally are using that phrase that Neely Fuller has said, whether you are using it in the same manner or similar, but doing your best to explain it without saying like, oh, I just copied this information just to say to you. So it's like being able to talk, like, I mean, being able to say things, but also being able to explain it in a way, in the way that you are particular using that phrase or that word or that whatever information you have provided.
Yeah, thank you. That definitely cleared it up. I understand now.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it could be just providing a source. Like why are we studying and quoting and using this book? Why are we trying to copy information and use information from this book? Because we've decided that this book is very useful in producing justice. I hope I'm tackling your question successfully.
For example, like Carter G. Woodson said, any person that can, I'm trying to give you an example, control your thinking. If a man can control your thinking, no, yeah, if a man can control your thinking, then he doesn't have to worry about what you're going to do. If you convince a person that they're inferior, I'm trying to paraphrase. If you convince a person that they're inferior, then you won't have to direct them to the back door. They'll go and find it on their own. So I guess what Neely Fuller was trying to say there is, if you're going to quote somebody, quote them accurately. If you're going to plagiarize somebody, let them know you're plagiarizing. Don't be plagiarizing. Is that, I don't know. That could be even more confusing.
No, that's definitely mentioned in the section. Definitely. Yeah, I understand it, kind of to be, not really saying you got this information from somebody or saying, repeating it like as if you're kind of like, I guess, following that person. You're just kind of, you're using that. To me, it makes sense to use that information because it's logical. Like that stuff makes sense. I'm gonna use it, not because somebody else said it. That's how I obtained the information, but I'm not doing it because that's what they said. I'm doing it because it's logical to do that.
I think it's a good segue into our closing comments. If anyone wants to start.
Yeah, I can start off. Just to close out, one of the things I've learned from Area 2 education is that it's really important to learn from everywhere, from a lot of people, from everyone in different contexts and situations. And I think also as I continue through my education journey, I will continue to focus on the words that I use and make sure that it can be understood on all levels, and also listen to others and understand each word and ask more questions. And don't spend my whole life studying and not doing.
Yeah, for me, it was really great today, like hearing all the codified talk and just hearing everyone attempt to practice code and to share their thoughts. Just we all have been brain trash, but we're all working to remove the niggerization chip that has been implanted in all of us. And I think we are doing a really stellar job from this discussion. Education is producing justice, attempting to produce justice with the truth. And that's my closing comment. I learned a lot. It was great hearing all the freaking comments from everyone, all the insights. It was very epic. It was blaxcellent, I should say.
I wanted to say that I'm glad we got in the area of education. I really liked this area. It made me learn that it's okay to ask questions. And I'm a person that likes to learn from everybody anyway, because I love to listen to other people's perspective of things. But to always keep educating yourself so that eventually you learn all these things, but you'll have a solution at the end to solve a problem that is continuously going on. So you're not educating yourself for not just nothing, but you're educating yourself for something at the end result.
For me, closing comments, I did really enjoy this education segment. Lots of insight gained, a lot of programming revealed for me. And, just work to counter racism, just more knowledge to counter racism. Once again, shout out Neely Fuller Jr. Yep.
Definitely for me, this is a great section. Like Kwaku Jamal said, definitely revealed a lot. I'm just, happy to be able to, become more codified, to be able to see these things and, develop more ways to solve the problem. Thank you for the constructive conversation, as Mr. Edward would say.
I feel like the passage outlined a lot of obstacles that people have in seeing the level of the racism, white supremacy. I think that in the reading, it really it basically validated a lot of thoughts that I've had about the way that the system of white supremacy works. And I think that if we use our time constructively, that's the first step. One of the biggest things too is I think that the video games, things like that, it's not that it should be taken away completely, obviously, because it's a part of our lives because of this system. But we need to make sure that our kids have limited exposure to them and that they're also getting, like people had mentioned in this conversation, the educational things. Like hopefully we can bring more educational things to children through these tools if we're going to be using them all the time. So I think that those are some very interesting points that were brought up.
I'm just grateful for this group and grateful for, I couldn't think of a more valuable investment in my time than spending this time with you. It's a game changer, really. And I like how Neely Fuller starts out really simple, really simplistic, and then breaks it down for you from the simplicity. He makes it crystal clear. So if we don't get this stuff after we get through this book studying together, yeah, there is some learning disability going on. I mean, this is really helping me. And also, what motivates me to help the younger people after having, been a part of this discussion, and I've been practicing it, but even more so now, is just thinking of what I wish I would have been told at that age. I wish if someone would have told me this, if they would have told me, if they would have taught me this, and then that just motivates me to go tell them. So that's my comments for this group, and I'm going to keep coming back.
We need you and every other victim out there who is available.
I'll go next. I learned a lot from this section. It was really helpful in like contextualizing a lot of my educational experience, my college experience especially. And I feel like it's gonna help me become a better like teacher to my daughter. And I just appreciated it a lot. I think that I appreciate it because I feel like it's a really useful way to learn, because I think a lot of people, like sometimes I'll hear O5 talk to people and they'll be like, I already know that. But then he'll be like, oh, okay, so like what's your definition for that? And then they won't have a definition. And I think that sometimes people like approach things with ego and they don't want to just like learn. It's like learning is not for the betterment of society to produce justice. It's just like a show of force almost. And so I think that this section is really good in like humbling my mind that like I'm learning to produce justice. So I appreciate it a lot.
Well said, Ms. Ash. Thank you for that.
Okay, and then for myself, I would say, although I'm a slow learner, I'm doing more than spectating. And I would also add, back on page 101, hopefully my time attending the book club, I've passed on constructive information willingly, deliberately, constantly, and efficiently to those who need it most here in the group and to the people listening in the archives, because you never know when a victim is going to be out of this system. So just take the constructive info I say and BGQ the rest. United Independent.
Blackcellent. Blacktastic. Also. Well, that's that. Thanks for our YouTube people for the live. That's really epic to have you guys on here. We're waiting for you to join whenever you're ready.